sorry, I mean, I'm just an old man and
You
can't
told
hear.
that the inter-imperialist conjuncture has come down or
Inter-imperialist rivalry, yeah.
rivalry. So, as the fundamental contradictions, the contradiction between the capitalist classes and the capitalist class and the proletariat, what is the current status? If there is no inter-imperialist contradiction, means whether there's no such contradiction existing between capitalist classes or
No, in fact, firstly, I would not say, there's a difference between inter-imperialist contradictions and inter-imperialist rivalry. Inter-imperialist contradiction, of course, exists, okay, but it does not take the form of inter-imperial. I said muting of inter-imperialist rivalry. It does not take the form of the kind of acute rivalry that Lenin had seen in that period, leading to wars. Not at all. I mean, in fact, there is no single instance you can think of in a more recent period in which there has been a war with different imperialist powers on different sides. Not at all. Okay. And if you're thinking of Russia, you see, some people, I think people like Samir Amin, think in terms of Russia or China emerging as new powers to challenge metropolitan capital hegemony. I think it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen. I don't think it has yet reached the point where we can actually say that the contradiction has reached a level of rivalry and so on. Of course, quite apart from the fact that Russia and China, I mean, certainly China cannot be really in that sense called an imperialist country. That itself raises theoretical questions. But, you see, talk of Russia, there is no doubt that as far as Putin is concerned, in foreign policy matters, he is raising issues of his own. But at the same time, and of course on Crimea and so on, Ukraine. But at the same time, I mean, a very substantial part of the Russian elite, and this I regret to say used to be true of the Chinese elite as well, which Xi Jinping was going to happen now, I don't know, but they send their funds out. In other words, they actually send money to the advanced capitalist countries and if possible send their children and families and so on. So that, these are not elites which actually are in such contradiction with imperialism that they would like to push their kind of, contradictions to a kind of, serious thing. As far as the capital versus working class contradiction is concerned, that, as I was saying, has accentuated greatly. Because you look at the United States, if the wages of workers have not increased for 50 odd years, in that case that is clear, and the labor productivity has increased phenomenally. As a result, the share of surplus has increased phenomenally within every capitalist country, including India. Phenomenal increase in the share of surplus. It is in this context that the conflict between workers and capitalists have actually become greater, except for the fact that, as I mentioned, the trade union movement has been weakened by the objective circumstances of neoliberalism. It's very important, therefore, for progressive forces to mobilize the workers, force the Worker-Peasant Alliance, to take each country and to take mankind in the aggregate out of this kind of bind where the closure of neoliberalism has brought us.
there is some kind of philosophical debates?
Philosophical?
Debates among itself?
There should be, of course, but
Just like
but there are philosophical debates. Okay, I mean, since you asked this, I'd like to just say one thing. To my mind, really, this is completely my personal view, one of the problems with the left now is that over substantial parts of the world, the left itself is, to my mind, hegemonized by neoliberalism. And I'll tell you why. Not because they are stupid, not because for a very simple reason. Neoliberalism has led to globalization. Any retreat from globalization means a retreat into some notion of a nation. Not a bourgeois notion of a nation, a worker-peasant alliance within the nation. A nation state based on a worker-peasant alliance. Now, from the point of view of the left, any retreat from even bourgeois globalization is something which appears anathema. So that, in some sense, the left's commitment to internationalism makes it susceptible to a kind of hegemonization by neoliberalism. That's certainly true of the European left. They absolutely see I mean, even Zizek and all these people, they see any talk of a retreat from globalization as a retreat into reaction. Now, they would be perfectly right if one could visualize a world revolution. Okay, so there is imperialist or neoliberal globalization, then we pose our globalization transcending that, a kind of world revolution that brings about a socialist globalization. But there is no coordinated world working class movement, there is no coordinated world peasant movement. So a worker-peasant alliance is only possible within the boundaries of a particular country. And as a result, if such a worker-peasant alliance comes into being and is in a position to capture power, it will have to be within the boundaries of the country. Therefore, if it has to survive, it has to detach itself from globalization. Lenin discussed this in his essay on the United Socialist States of Europe.
So three questions. So first one.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. The first one is like you point out the retreat of the organized working class in some sense in the network of neoliberalism. That fragmentation due to say automation or retreat of the public sector and so on. But there have been several pieces that we put forward, like on how we could reconceptualize what we mean by working class in general. Like one such idea is like by Professor David Harvey, like he talks about like class struggles envisioned as struggles for built environment or the living spaces that we live in. So what is your opinion on that? That's one. The second question is like regarding like you spoke of like withering away of states, like what they envisioned and so on. Now do you see like technology, such as bitcoins, do they offer some like, I wouldn't say even possibilities, but some thought process around those things. Now, third part is like regarding the flight of capital. I'm sure like Indians, the state governments of India face similar situations where like they are threatening, like they don't offer certain good terms for certain diseases. Then there's always flight of capital in another state. Now, during your association with the Kerala government, what was your experience and could you do something specific to overcome such situations? What is your experience?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to environment and so on, obviously the struggle, environmental struggle is a part of the working class struggle. I agree that the working class struggle has got to be generalized. But we must not forget, in the context of things like environmental struggle, the fact that there's no healthcare in this country. There's no education in this country. I mean, we can't forget these elementary things. Land reforms, okay. All those basic things we cannot forget. In fact, I mean, I have this very strong feeling, even in the left, when we talk about peasant demands, we only think of peasant demands land. We don't think that the peasant demands education for his children. The peasant demands healthcare for his children. And therefore, one way of forming the worker-peasant alliance is for the left to actually promote universal, free healthcare in the form of a national health service, universal free education, quality education through a system of neighborhood schools for all children, etc. In other words, environment, yes, but of course environment has to be dovetailed with a whole lot of other measures as far as we are concerned. So that's okay. Now Bitcoin and so on, I mean, these are not, okay, they are new phenomena, but on the other hand, I don't think they really offer any way out of the existing cul-de-sac to which neoliberal capitalism has come. Now, flight of capital, yeah, if you're talking about flight of capital within states, one of the arguments which was put forward in favor of the goods and services tax was this, that look, different states are competing, and that's a fact that different states are competing against one another to attract capital. Okay. When different states are competing to attract capital, naturally there's a race to the bottom. And therefore, if they had uniform taxes, one way of attracting capital is to reduce taxes. So if there's a uniform set of taxes, then that goes. It's a non sequitur, because after all, you can actually have a minimum tax and then let states be free to have any taxation above that. You don't actually have uniform taxes everywhere. But on the other hand, this is a fact that different states compete against one another in order to attract capital. I would like to say that when I was associated with the Kerala government, we made no effort to attract any capital from anywhere. I mean, in the sense that, of course, we are not opposed to capital coming in, very good. But on the other hand, this whole business of going out, I mean, Gujarat summit and things like that. And at the same time, I'd like to say that between 2005 and 11-12, which was roughly the period of the LDF government, the rate of growth in per capita terms, GDP growth minus population growth in Kerala, rate of growth of per capita income in Kerala was exactly the same as in Gujarat, according to official figures. I've been told that Gujarat figures are overstated, but let's accept it. Okay, let's accept it. So it's remarkable. I mean, here is one state that actually went all the way that, summit, this, that, and the other, but we did no such thing, but we had the same kind of per capita GDP. Yes.
Maybe one last question. Yep. Last person.
Yes, please.
I think we should address the elephant in the room. See, the topic is titled "An Alternative World." We should address the failings of October Revolution itself. Like you had admitted part of it, like the single-party despotism. Since this alternative we are talking about is built on socialist theories, like it is first conceived in a theory and then practiced. So, however, theory improved from the time of 1917 that we can prevent any monopolies or restrictions or prohibitions, anything of that sort in the future,
Yes.
in our alternative.
But let me just clarify one thing. It was not as if 1917 occurred on a theory that wanted a one-party dictatorship. Of course not. On the contrary, it was very clear that there would have to be a multiplicity of parties. The Bolshevik proposal was, for instance, that newsprint would be allocated to different political parties in proportion to the votes they got, or something of that kind. So that the idea of a multiplicity of parties characterizing a socialist society was always accepted. Okay. It was much later that the thesis began to be developed that one class, one party, that each class can be represented only one party, which I think is completely wrong. There is no absolutely no. That is making a theoretical virtue out of something that may have become necessary at a certain point of time. So I do not see, and as I told you, one-party dictatorship actually produced a new kind of alienation. I mean, let's take a very simple example. If you have a one-party dictatorship, and if to be a professor in a university or to be a member of the party, every riffraff is going to join the party, because then that's the only way of getting promoted. In fact, there are very interesting examples that Zizek, for instance, gives in Eastern Europe, where he has actually seen that people who have nothing to do with communism, who have no vision of socialism, they all join the party because it's the only way of defending your material interest, rising, getting promoted, and all the rest of it, getting contract or whatever. So I think this whole idea of a one-party dictatorship is something which was not a part of the Bolshevik program. Historically, it was a contingent development, and that contingent development was later theorized as a kind of socialist theory, which I reject completely. Okay. To my mind, any weakening of I stick to the belief that a socialist state must empower the people. Therefore, it is not a state standing above the people, but on the contrary, as Lenin said in State and Revolution, which by the way Chomsky thinks is a wonderfully anarchist document, that the State and Revolution puts forward a vision of a socialist state which I buy, which actually says that on the morrow, from the moment of the revolution, that state begins to wither away. Wither away doesn't mean that you make yourself open to all kinds of counter-revolutionaries and so on, but people themselves get mobilized into the act of defending the revolution against counter-revolution. Okay? One of the saddest things about the collapse of the Soviet Union is that when it collapsed, there was not even a general strike. Okay? And that's sad. that is symptomatic of the depoliticization of the working class that is taking place. The dictatorship of the proletariat became a dictatorship on behalf of the proletariat, benefiting the proletariat through the welfare state measures that I was talking about, but the proletariat was not the subject first. Oh, yeah, no.
I think we'll start from here, one, then we'll come back.
No, at this present point, that what are the solutions for unemployment, quality of life, farmer suicides, hydrocarbon issues, sharing of water with states, etc.?
If I can give a one-word answer, socialism. Of course, how exactly a socialism would achieve it, how exactly we in the transition to socialism we would be tackling all this. These are difficult problems, you know. But that is precisely in a sense what I'm saying, that that we have now come to. I'm saying this because it's not recognized, as someone pointed out, that the government is forever saying, oh, the mine is slowing down, of course, and so on. That, for a start, this whole preoccupation with growth is nonsense. I mean, listen, let's not forget that in Russia, a lot of economic historians are now saying that prior to the First World War, there were very high growth rates in Russia. So, but I have not seen Lenin ever discussing the high growth rate of Russia. He was talking on the democratic revolution in Russia. To my mind, the significant thing is not the growth rate. The significant thing is the fact that the Dalits are being exploited, the Dalits are being excluded. Even the kind of reservations that we had earlier are no longer there because of privatization. There is no reservation in the private sector. So to my mind, there is a setback to the democratic revolution that is happening. And when that is happening, then I think struggle against that is primary, and the growth rate and so on means nothing. To me, it means absolutely nothing.
So, I've got two questions. And they're both a bit long, so probably time. Sir, you talked about the fact that if today a hard left-leaning party politic were to take over, there would be a great deal of economic warfare or a surge of anti-left propaganda due to the shortages or trade-related problems that might develop. Does this not mean that at least initially for such a state to function, a free, open public sphere where the state can be criticized could not possibly be permitted? Second question. So you mentioned the Nazi state as an example of the quintessential fascist state, greatly controlled or influenced by a capitalist or bourgeoisie's shadow council. But the Nazi Party or the National Socialist, I repeat, German Workers' Party made policies that were very much what we would consider socialist at the time. Take the example of the Nazi state's 25-point program, which included demands like nationalization of all previously associated industries, division of profits of all heavy industries, expansion of a large scale of old age welfare. Understanding this, can we still say that the capitalists in the Nazi state were actually had the amount of power you seemingly granted? Thank you.
Okay. The first question. No, I agree with you that the left coming to power is not going to be a cakewalk. It's not going to be a garden party, particularly now. There will be huge opposition. And of course, I agree with you that there's no kind of formula. Of course, it is true. Look at Maduro. Just look what's happening in Venezuela. In other words, when Maduro was not even attempting anything socialist, but on the other hand, Trump still cannot stand there. Okay, so it is going to be difficult. But and similarly, there is no formula. But it is essential in our conception to be very clear that socialism must mean that people become masters of their destiny. They are politically involved, and consequently, even when there may be periods of restriction, we must see those periods of restrictions as setbacks, as wrong. I wouldn't say wrong. For turns that should be avoided, that should be rectified as far as possible. In other words, I think our conception is very important. Okay, and I think rejecting the conception of a socialism identified with a one-party dictatorship is absolutely essential. That's what I'm saying. Okay, Nazi. Listen, the monopoly. Have you seen Visconti's film The Damned? You should see it, you know. That different leaders in the Nazi party were associated, financed, propped up by different monopoly houses. Krupp supported some, IG Farben supported others, and all these people were even associated in building and running the various concentration camps. You know, Mikhail Kalitsky, I don't know if you have read his thing, you know, he actually talks about fascism being an alliance between big capital and the fascist upstarts. Call them fascist upstarts. But that is the core of fascism. Sure, they built autobahns and so on and so forth, and then, you know, state expenditure increased, not just military, but also in autobahns and so on. You can say the same expansion of the public sector. But on the other hand, fundamentally, the Nazi system was based on the fact that individual Nazi leaders, the party, their program, all of it catered to the wishes, demands, interests of a handful of monopoly capitalists.
Thank you for this nice thought. I mean, I really appreciated this the title you choose, but why did you call it Becoming Nazis? What could we do to actually change something? Because we've heard democratically, it's not really possible. The left-wing parties coming to power, then yeah, they might have to act within the ways they have to and lose again. So what could we actually do? How could we act here in this room to become or to get this world alternative what you're talking about?
You know, I would say that at this moment, the threat of fascism is very serious all over the world. And I think the weakness of fascism is that it has no program of any kind to get out of this economic crisis. I think it's very important for the left to formulate an immediate transitional program. Of course, if you say socialism, then nobody's going to come with you. It has to be an immediate transitional program. Plausible immediate transitional program, mobilize people around it, other political forces, similarly other classes, not just the working class to start with, but also other possible allied classes and so on. And the left must project an alternative. And you know, in countries where it has projected an alternative, it has actually to an extent blunted the fascist challenge. For a start, you know, I mean, whatever you may say of Bernie Sanders, after all, he was getting a fair amount of support, you know, because he did have some kind of an alternative projection of a program. In Britain, for instance, not many people know that Jeremy Corbyn, who has some kind of an alternative program, actually the Labour votes went up at the expense of UKIP. You know, UKIP had got 11% of the votes in the previous election, not the last one, previous election, is down to 2%. So that is, and a lot of these votes came towards Labour, and that was, I think, because Jeremy Corbyn actually projected some sort of an alternative program. I think it's very important for the left to project an alternative program to get out of the crisis now. In France, likewise, Marine Le Pen's vote have actually dropped between the presidential election and the parliamentary elections. And what is more, her party actually got marginally less votes than Mélenchon and the French Communist Party put together, who did not fight the parliamentary elections together, and she actually got less number of seats, much less than the left, who did not fight together. And what is more, now you're beginning to see splits emerge among the fascists. So where the left takes an aggressive position in terms of providing a vision for the people to come out of the crisis, socialism automatically, I believe capitalism is a spontaneous system. The moment you know, I don't see, honestly, I don't see a contradiction between reform and revolution. On the contrary, I see revolution as something which emerges through a systematic pursuit of reform. Okay. So that being the case, I see that, you know, that the left has to come out initially with a program that can mobilize a lot of people, and of course in the process of carrying it forward, you are hitting against, as it were, the frontiers of capitalism, they are going to become more and more aggressive, and then you go further.
Yes, one last question.
Yes, I have two questions. First, what's your take on market socialism? And the second one is, what did you say about the example of Hong Kong where market economy was most successful? So some people are projecting that as a model of
Okay, market socialism. I mean, honestly, I think of market socialism as a contradiction in terms. Okay, in a particular sense, that I'm not saying that socialism should not have markets. Okay, there are a whole lot of jobs but market socialism is a contradiction in terms for the following reason. In feudalism, people work because the monsignor has got a whip. Okay. In capitalism, people work because if you don't, to the satisfaction of your boss, out you go, and there is the reserve army, you join the ranks of the unemployed. Anybody who believes that capitalism is compatible with full employment does not understand capitalism. Now, in a socialist country, I believe there must be full employment. I think the idea of socialism having a reserve army of labor is a contradiction in terms. So socialism must be a full employment economy. Okay. If that is the case, then when we are talking about market socialism, so Yugoslavia was market socialism, but Yugoslavia had very high rates of unemployment. So if you mean by market socialism, a Yugoslav model where worker-managed, state-owned enterprises compete against one another in the market, then that reproduces, to my mind, the anarchy of capitalism, which means both the existence of unemployment and also inflation and so on. Therefore, I think a socialist economy must be one in which there is full employment. A socialist economy can delegate a whole lot of things to the market, but market cannot be the determinant feature. And quite apart from anything else, that also goes against the formation of a collective. I mean, the whole point of socialism is the formation of a collective, that, you know, the liberation of each is concerned with the liberation of all. So it pits one group of workers against another, and that's wrong. Your second question is about Hong Kong. Well, see, Hong Kong did not have a peasantry. Half of India's population consists of people who engage in the agricultural sector. So all these examples which are sometimes given of the small island economies and then generalized to India are examples which are not very relevant. Thank you.